We got anybody out there? Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear the guitar. I'm just gonna share some memories I have of my big brother George, and my very fortunate opportunity to be asked by him to be his assistant on a number of fabulous recordings. Just gonna sit here and doodle a little bit until we get some people showing. Mary, can you hear me out there? Hmm. Hey, Clive, good to see you again. My pal Mary's out there. I see her out. We're just gonna wait a little bit more, and then we're just gonna talk about George. I'm gonna share some things that George turned me on to, some things that we chatted about, uh, some guitar stuff. We'll talk about maybe Weekend in LA. It's a great tune. Affirmation. Talk about how George uh, um, thinks over these. I'll share some candid shots of me and George and stuff hanging out at my house. And if you could do a search, you can on YouTube you can find videos that we posted. One afternoon, George called me and my dear friend Richie Hart, or his birth name Richie Holmberger, who just retired from teaching at Berkeley. He used to teach the West Montgomery course. Probably the most knowledgeable person on West Montgomery I certainly have ever been associated with. Anyway, and George called us up one day and he said, and this is before I took my day job at CBS News, oddly enough. I worked 20 years at CBS News, plus I still go in as a freelancer. I'll be going there tomorrow. But I think it was 1997, and he calls us up and he says, I want you and Hart to sit around my house and play guitar because the CBS Sunday Morning is going to do an expose on him. So he was gracious enough to count us in on that. I'm one of a few people that have had, really close, ties with George, especially in the, of course, in the music thing, as being friends. I mean, the list goes on all the people that he's influenced and all the people that have been part of his inner circle of guitar players. Russell Malone. Certainly the guitar player that's been in his band, Mike O'Neill, has had the opportunity to be playing behind George for, probably 30 years. There's another guitar player in Jersey, Vinny Valentino. But many guitar players have been influenced by George and have known George as a friend and a mentor. So he shared a lot of stuff with us on how he approaches music and how he approaches his guitar playing. So I'll turn you on to some of the things he turned me on to, or how he shined the light on stuff for me. So we'll wait like maybe another 2 minutes, and then we'll hit it and we'll start chatting about this. And you have any questions about it? Yeah, Clive, I'm well. I'm good. Anyway, there's two tunes that I thought to chat about. One was a Jose Feliciano tune that George did on his Breezin' album, and that was Affirmation. And the other one that was titled after his album Weekend in LA. I'll just go through them briefly so you can pick them apart and see what they're about. Affirmation. So let's talk about that. The changes, pretty basic. It's a E minor 9 going to a B minor 11. So the main approach to that would be anything that's related to E minor, which would be E minor A7, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, G major 7. So here's that sound. get to the B minor 11, that's D major 7. So it's almost like doing 2-5 to D, okay? Because this is the 5 of D, okay? And then this B minor is the 6 of D major, which is also a tonic sound, which could be D major 7. All right, so that lightens it up. So, all right, you can hear it plain as day, and when it goes to here. Now, there's something that I guess I should establish to start with. We deal in the 12-tone system, okay? This is not chord scale based. This is not anything. It's chords and melody based. The 12-tone system is Charlie Parker's use of chromaticism, targeting chord tones. I've talked about this almost every time I've been on. So when you hear George do things like this, okay? Now this is for D minor. For D major 7 or B minor 7 of any type. Okay? That's all the same targeted notes, and he's using the chromatic tones to embellish those notes. He's garnishing the meat and potatoes with some parsley and, trickle of balsamic vinegar. All right? Or if you want to think about it as a sentence, he's taking the nouns and verbs and he's adding colorful adjectives and pronouns and adverbs. So here is my first chord. Okay? E minor 7. Same as a G major 7, same as an A 7, same as a C sharp minor 7 flat 5. Now I'm playing a D major 7. You can hear that is the same. It's the same targeted tones. All right? All right, now the tune progresses to a 2-5, going to a 4 chord, or in this case, a G major 7. Okay, so the 2-5 is A minor 7, D7. Well, it's all D7. And it's going to resolve to G, which just brings us back to that. Brings us back to that E minor 7 kind of sound. Okay, then it goes from there. Well, guess what? That's an E9 chord, same as a B minor. All right, and then it goes to an A sus, which is nothing more than G major 7. Okay, put A in the bass. And we're back to the G major sound. All right, and it resolves back to I thought I shared this on Facebook. I did post this on Facebook. Mary's telling me to make sure I share it on people on Facebook. I thought it was posted on there with the link. Anyway, so those are the changes. Let's move on now. So the second half of that song, instead of going to the E7, it goes 2-5 to G, then to G minor. Okay, then F sharp minor 7. Now, in my mind, as a 3 chord, F sharp minor 7 is really a 1 chord. Okay, it's the upper partial of the 1 chord. So if you're playing this, okay, so it's an upper partial of that. All right, and then it takes you to a B7 chord, and then 2-5 back to, and now what did I do there? I substituted flat 5 substitutions. So I went from a D minor, I'm sorry, a D major 7 or E or F sharp minor 7, B7, and I used a D9 instead, taking me to some kind of an A7 or E minor. And then I used an E flat, resolving to I may change my camera angle so you can see my other camera if it helps you better. Yeah, sorry about that. I probably should have had that on first. Let's move my... All right, so I'm going to show you that last demonstration. All right, so F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is extension of D, to me D major 7 because it's a 3 chord. That takes me to some kind of whatever I want to use for a B7, and in this case I'm using that's all E minor 7. A7, okay. Now here are some things you'll see George do if you're up close with him, okay. And I'm going to point some of these out. Let's just take G major 7, okay. Well. A G major 7 is E minor 7, or like I said, F sharp minor 7 flat 5. So you'll see so he'll arpeggiate a D because it's all those same sounds, same note. All right, same difference if he's going. I just did D going to a G major 7. All right. Well, D is the same as a B minor. So you've heard George do this. Okay. All right. So that adds, you know, a lot of great motion. Again, it's a 12-note system, use of chromaticism. So I'll go back to that. That to me is all E minor. So anyway, that's some of the things that you'll see in George's playing, and if you analyze it, and if you look at George's, I mean, I just spend most of my time still picking apart Charlie Parker and George Benson and Wes Montgomery. You know, now that's pretty much the essence of Affirmation. Great tune. You know, I throw it on the gig all the time. It always brings a smile to people. Another tune that I wanted to discuss briefly is Weekend in L.A. It's one of the few songs that's actually was penned by George. It's not a cover. That was his tune. And yeah, it starts out with a like a D minor 11. What's a D minor 11? A minor. It's an A minor 9. It's a C major 7. Okay, it's a D9. Okay, so and then it moves up a minor third. And what is that? Nothing more than a C minor 7, E flat, Okay, I'm repeating myself so you can see that, how these all lie. Um, all right, and then the tune starts with the. And George does that. Well, he doesn't do it all the time, but he does that. And this. And then 2-5 back to 4, okay? Because the tune is in G. And then E flat major 7, which is the same as C minor, which is the same as A minor 7 flat 5, which is the same as a F9. Okay, so you see a lot of similarities there. Now there is a section that goes to, and he does this. And we'll talk about that. Okay. So we'll talk about that. Anyway, there are some things that are George's inventions, along with what we just discussed with his single note approach, and one was what those bridges. What he did on those bridges. He likes to play a third or a sixth with an octave. So if I was doing, okay, sorry, he doubles that. So G's here, E flat. Sorry. Okay, so he just fattens it up. Now, in talking with him, a lot of this stuff came from listening to other instruments, and many times, not only sax players, but hey, cousin Lynn, but also listening to Hammond organ players and piano players. Before I move on, I just want to. What do I do with it? I want to share this with you. This is an important thing if you can find it. And you can really get behind George's concepts on how he plays. It's this, the kind of like cuts through because of my green screen. But track this down, The Art of Jazz Guitar. And you can, see a lot of what George's approaches are if you get that. It's a blast. It's very candid. It's a great recording. A great video. CD, DVD, I should say. Anyway, let's get back to that. So a lot of his things you'll see that are very pianistic. When you see him do these, he'll tell you he got that from listening to piano players jingle the keys. Like some of the old time stuff. He'll go. And what he's done there is he's basically played an octave and put a fourth or a fifth between it. He never truly explained how he came across it, except he said, "But what sounds good?" So when I kind of took it apart, I said, "Well, let me just take a major 9 arpeggio and harmonize it, and then put whether I think it should be a fourth or a fifth. Okay, so I took this, all right, and now I went. That seemed to sound good, because if I do all fourths, not first off, the it's not gonna be synonymous with the harmony, the key, the harmony of the moment. So that's how I believe he came up with it. And they are very effective. So he kind of like took the tools of Wes, which would have been this, and he added. So that was that to me is a George invention. He just kicked it up a notch. There's something else that George shared with me one day. We were talking about what he calls stacking triads. Okay. Now, in Berkeley terms, it's upper structure triads. It's nothing more than a D triad with a C bass, which is really a D7 chord with flat 7 in the bass, or C major 7 with 9 sharp 11 and 13, which means to tell you that D7 is nothing more than a C major 7 chord with a D in the bass. That's all things that you have to start to recognize, or it's an F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord. Anyway, I'm reiterating this a lot, so you start to get the gist of those, those total targeted tones, and then use all your 12 notes to surround those. Anyway, so George and I was chatting, and he goes, and he did this. He was playing a B flat chord, and he went, and so I stopped him, and I'm like, well, that's that chord, okay? But what he did instinctively is he established B flat by just playing the root and the fifth, okay? And then he played the G triad above that. Which I thought was a great sound. Now, of course, it moves in minor thirds. So that was another one of his little inventions that he shared. Now I took it a step further, just in my own thing, and I went, okay, if that's that, okay. I said, well, here's E7's the flat 5 of that, okay. Or if it's E7 sharp 9. So it's kind of like extending the harmony. It's kind of based on stacking upper structure triads on the symmetric diminished scale, I guess, if you want to really get Berkeley theoretical. Rosemel, I'll keep on drilling it. I will. F sharp minor 7 flat 5, D9, C major 7 9 sharp 11, A minor 6. However you want to look at it. Anyway, so that was a thing he shared. Okay, he shared, and those are fun things. So some of the inventions besides his harmonic and melodic approach, which is awesome. And it's not complicated. He said to me, I think simply and I play complicated. I play, and I chatted with Richie Hart yesterday, and we're talking about all this stuff, it's chord tones, it's extensions, it's, creating melodies like that. And I'll expand upon it even more as I continue my rant. I'm just going to share a bunch of fun stuff, here's a shot of me and Hart and George. That was one of the days when George was playing nearby. Because since he moved to Phoenix, I missed the guy. He's not really around. So we have to uh, jump on the opportunity. Um, and if you don't know who Richie Hart is, do yourself a favor and YouTube him. Great guitar player, one of my dearest friends. We met in 1971, I think, at a Johnny Smith seminar, and we were Berkeley classmates. Um, a great guitar player. Here's another little. I mean, I have so many. You could do searches. I have George we're playing in my kitchen. Here is a few of us at the assembly, which is a restaurant. There's George, of course, myself, and two fabulous guitar players, John Tropez and Russell Malone. So, these are fun things. I have pictures with George and my dad, and I mean, George was when he lived here was very much a big part of the family. I just want to show you something that I touched upon last time, and let me see if I can find it. Well, here's a candid shot of George in my living room, playing D'Angelicos and D'Acquistos because some guy brought a bunch there for George to see if George was interested in them, and George eventually did take one or two. I don't really recall which ones he had, but it was a fun afternoon. I mean, GB was, always a great hang. Um, I discussed last week about George's picking approach, and I thought I do. I have a tight shot of George here. Let's put this here. Here's George when he sat in with me, probably 2001, and he's using at the time I owned that. It was a Camp Alone special, and you can see George's right hand where his picking technique. Now, I adopted it many years back. My reason being, well, you want to if you know someone that has the tone and the sound you want, well then why am I gonna not go right to the source? And here's another shot that really shows the angle of his pick. Let's see if I can blow that up. And what impressed me is George's angle of his pick. It's not as if it's going in the direction of the pick guard. Okay, it's going, and I like to consider it. You have the leading edge, which is this. Okay, like many people play, and then there's the trailing edge, like this, which is the way I play, the way George plays. I think Richie Hart, when Richie's not using straight thumb. There's a number of guitar players that have adapted that approach. The thing that it's the tone you get with that attack. The other is the level of stress in your right hand. You lock your thumb. My thumb is locked in that position, kind of like the West position, okay? And that's it. And I'm barely holding the pick. I mean, there's really no very little effort to it at all. So, now another thing that I turned everybody on to last week is that George plays Fender mediums. Okay? Fender mediums. Now, these are Fender mediums made, and I have my initials on them, but they're Fender mediums. And he takes an emery board and he sharpens the tip, so it's not as rounded, so he gets more articulation. Unlike Pat Martino, who picks this way, okay, um, and plays with a darker tone, George has a pretty bright sound. All right. And I'm not truly anchoring my hand. This guitar has no pickguard on it, so it's kind of like floating around there. But there's no stress in my hand. So that was something else I wanted to turn everybody on to. I watched George when we were at clubs, and he'd be searching for a pick, and his wife Johnny'd be going through her purse for a pick because they just asked George to come sit in, at the Blue Note or whatever, and we'd be searching, and he'd be going like this to make sure he had touched that pick. Now, is the whole true now? I haven't ran that by George in a little bit. I owe him a call. So I'm going to ask him if that's true, and I'm not talking out of school. But I witnessed it when he told me how he kind of, semi-doctors up his picks. But they are Fender mediums, because at the time, everybody was doing, all these really heavy guitar picks. And then, of course, there was the Mind pick, which were made of stone and all this other craziness. But George always reached for a Fender medium. I mean, he does play his guitar flat wound strings that are, I think, 13s or 14s. I had a few sets. I don't play flat wounds on my jazz box. I tend to lean towards round wounds. Not that I have one little Camp Alone, which was modeled after a GB10, so I call it an RD10. But George plays those. Some other stuff that I want to share with everybody. Besides George being a consummate musician and an awesome singer, and I've witnessed him get on the bandstand with Jon Hendricks when there was no guitar in sight, and what's up with the wrist, Rosmel? Okay, let's tell your story. You tell the story about your Gibson Johnny Smith yet? No, I didn't tell a story about my Gibson Johnny Smith that George Benson bought. It's actually the one he's using. George did all the breeze and stuff on a Johnny Smith, and he still owns it. And I think it's in a museum somewhere in either Pittsburgh or someplace. But no, I had my Johnny Smith, and oddly enough, I had one. I at one point in my life had a D'Angelico XL. My years at Berkeley, and during the lean years, which are, the '80s, I foolishly sold it. Anyway, at one point, George and I had gone over to Jimmy DeQuisto's out in Long Island, and he had bought the Soloist from Jimmy for like $30,000 or so, something like that. And George said I should get a DeQuisto. So George bought my Johnny Smith at top dollar. He wanted me to have it. I gave the money to Jimmy DeQuisto as a down payment on a Centaura. But then years went by, and then Jimmy DeQuisto met his untimely death. And I never got my guitar, and I never really got my deposit back. So it became a tax deduction. But anyway, that was my story of my Johnny Smith. George has it. If you search George, the one he's playing on this thing with Joe Sample, it's a video where he's doing a Stevie Wonder tune. That was my Johnny Smith. His Johnny Smith from his heyday is, I believe, enshrined somewhere. Anyway, getting back to. So anyway, we were at the gig, and we had done a long session, and again, not to reiterate, but I had the great opportunity to be George's assistant on albums like Tenderly and Big Boss Band and Love Remembers. So if you search on those CDs, you'll see my name in the credits somewhere. But that was an honor, without a doubt. Um, it kind of for a guy like many out there who don't have much marquee value, me being one of them. Uh, my association with George and being part of that kind of validated me, at least to myself, as being, a valid part of improvising guitar. Anyway, or being a jazz musician or a blues musician or whatever title you want to put, which is the thing we're going to talk about. Anyway, we're sitting at the table. George is sound asleep with his head in his hands like this, and John Hendricks goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor to have George Benson in the audience. Let's give him a big round of applause and get him up here." Now, there was no guitar in sight. So I wake up George, and he's like, "What's going on? What's the problem?" I said, "George, they just invited you on the bandstand." So he quaffs his hair a little bit. He gets on the bandstand, and he just starts scatting. And he starts scatting Billy's Bouncer, and he blew the doors off the place from a stone cold sleep. He blew the doors off. So the man is a consummate musician on all levels. If that gentleman knew how to tap dance, and I guess he did have an acting debut on one TV show where he played a blind musician / murderer. But anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing that George instilled in me is sing, because singing doesn't take away from your music. You being a great guitar player, it enhances it. Because I went through years of singing as a child and ruining my voice, actually, with vocal notes, trying to do the screaming in rock bands in high school. And in my Berkeley years, I poo-pooed singing. My two roommates, who were great piano players, Jerry LaRosa and the late Ray Bauer, had all the gigs in Boston, playing at the piano bars and singing, standards and Elton John and Billy Joel. And when I would get called to do these gigs, I would immediately say, "Listen, man, I don't sing. You're not going to get me to do Cat Stevens and James Taylor and Jim Croce. I'm a consummate. I just sit in the corner and play and do my best interpretation of Joe Pass." Anyway, and I lost many a gig not auditioning for show bands because I didn't want a mic in front of me. I thought it was, beneath me. Well, I don't know what the hell I was thinking, because the best players are the best singers, and the best singers are the best players. And we could, who influenced George? Clive asked me. Well, I'm about to tell you one of them. Anyway, if you go back and you look at all of the, really fabulous singers, for the most part, they are players. And a number one influence of George Benson, for sure, was Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole was a great piano player. He was also asked to sing because the crowd in the restaurants or the bars or where he was playing they're losing their attention span. Okay. Diana Krall, even Kenny Burrell is a great singer. So getting back to George's influences, Nat King Cole, for sure. Ray Charles, great player, great singer, So there's a connection there, and it's not. So George instilled in me that, sing, So I resurrected my voice, and I think Mary's still on here. It's a raspy voice because I tore the hell out of it, So I sound like Dr. John singing, but I guess it works for me. So so that's one thing that George instilled. The other thing that George instilled is just because. Well, let's just go back a little bit. When Charlie Parker was alive and Dizzy Gillespie, and they were coming up in the bebop realm, okay, which is, you know, a realm I continue to study, and so does George. And they were playing. Okay, let's think about this. Stella by Starlight. That's a pop tune from a movie featured Ray Milland called The Uninvited. It's a ghost story. Okay, Days of Wine and Roses, pop song. All right, and Richie Hart and I were chatting about this yesterday. How High the Moon, pop song of their era, of their time. So when they got to improvise, they chose the pop songs of their era. Now, there are jazz tunes, okay, that you could definitely define as jazz tunes. Tunes that Miles wrote were jazz tunes. They were written by a jazz musician for a canvas to improvise on. Okay, Dizzy's tunes, it's all peanuts, you know. Con Alma. There are tunes that were written by jazz musicians, you know, for the, you know, Giant Steps. Okay, no one's gonna dance to Giant Steps. It's not a pop hit. It's basically, you know, a minefield to help embellish or help in expand your horizons as an improviser. Okay, but for the most part, you know, Cherokee. Those were all tunes that were pop tunes of the time. So when George took a song that goes like this, okay, which I had the good fortune to play with not only George, but the vocal group that made it a hit in the 60s. I was their music director for a period of time called the Drifters. George took a tune that influenced him and that he used to sing when he had a band that was similar to the Drifters in Pittsburgh. Okay? And then he turned it around and said, you know what? It doesn't have to be, it's still part of the American Songbook. It's just, the American Songbook keeps growing. It doesn't just end when Cole Porter dies or Gershwin dies. I'm not saying that those tunes are not unbelievable songs. They are, and they're great things to improvise on. But there's nothing wrong with playing over, you know, a pop tune of our generation. So Mary can vouch for this, and other people that work with me on gigs. I mean, I do songs, and I call it hijacking. I do songs and I hijack them and I turn them into my way of doing it, just like George did, you know, Broadway. Okay, he made it his, and there was nothing better than driving down to my lesson with Dennis Sandoli with the Weekend in L.A. Cassette in my car, listening to George play his butt off on that tune with Ralph McDonald. And I forgot who the drummer was. I'm sure Clive will remind me because he does that dum 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 dum. He was a Berkeley guy too. Anyway, so on my gigs, you know, I blow over tunes like because it's just as much a challenge. So, well, what song is that? Otis Redding's song, Dock of the Bay. Okay, I blow over this song. The songs from our generation. Now, I didn't grow up in a bebop era. Maybe George was the tail end of it. I study it and I apply my understanding of it and understanding of Wes and of George and everybody else to what I want to play, you know. But I hijack everything I can get, you know. There's a great recording. There's a great video of George doing Stand By Me with Linda Carter on a TV show. Man, he kills it. You know, he didn't just go, oh, it's a 1-6-4-5. He kills it. He just kills it. And that's a thing that, you know, um, uh, George instilled in me. And the fact that there has to be a level of entertainment in what you do. And he learned that from Jack McDuff. If people are not clapping tapping their feet and feeling the music, you're not doing your job. And Jack McDuff, when George was with him, that was a funky band. It was a funky organ trio. Other people that George was inspired by, because Clive asked me that. I just want to elaborate on that more. I mean, he was inspired by everybody. Grant Green, of course, Wes, uh, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, and I'm sure there's many, many, many others. Like George says, if you don't want me to steal it, don't play it in front of me. Anyway, just real quick, if you look at this tune, called Taking It to the Streets, well, that's an F minor 6 chord. All right? And it goes to a C chord. And then it goes to a, it all has G in the pedal. Okay, so pedal's G. Okay, it's a D7 chord. Then it goes to a D minor or a G sus. You could make it, it could be an improvisational format. Doesn't matter what the song is. If you're doing it like a record copy and you want it, then that's, you ain't going to get me to do that. I'm not part of a cover band. But so I guess that's what George showed me, is that it doesn't matter what the material, you can make it your own. And God knows George did it with all those tunes that he does. I mean, even up to just recently playing with a bunch of other people in the funk world. The names escape me. So, yes, he's a jazz musician. Yes, he's blues influenced. Yes, he's a great singer. But he's a musician, and he makes everything his own. So these are the things I wanted to share today. I have unbelievable memories. So does Richie Hart, and so does everybody else that he's touched. He's a young people may not know who he is, but he's definitely an American treasure, along with like the Stevie Wonders, and the Tony Bennett's, I'll just share another story briefly. George and I were at Bradley's listening to Red Mitchell and someone else play. George is a very spiritual man. Most people know what his religion is, but I was sitting there at the time. I was a little bit more, certainly more buffed, because I was always a gym rat, and back then I was more buffed. And I'm wearing a motorcycle jacket, and we're sitting at the table, and the man starts becoming very insulting to George, and looked over at me and said, "What are you, his bodyguard?" And I was getting a little pissed off. The neighborhood kid was about to expose himself and get in someone's face. And George disarmed me in a second by how gracious he was, even to this man who was insulting. And we finally just got up, and George looked at me and said, I guess we can't sit and enjoy the music here tonight. But the man followed us out into the street, but George was extremely gracious, and being in his company and seeing, he always has the right stuff to say. He's always disarming. He's an awesome individual, and if you ever get to meet him in person, I think many of you have. I'm not sure if I know Rich Giorgiani did. He met him in my house and sitting on the back deck playing guitar. I don't know if Clive, if you ever had the opportunity, or Rosmel, I think back on how fortunate I was, because George has been one of my heroes since pretty close to the first day I got exposed to, quote, jazz guitar. and it was Wes and George and Pat Martino and Grant Green. But who would ever think that, you know, I would have had that opportunity? So I owe George a call. I certainly miss him not being nearby. I know Richie Hart and I both miss him. We've had some unbelievable times with him. But I wanted to share my time with George and what I got from George. So I covered a lot of stuff. If there's any questions before we wrap it up, I don't want to take any more time from everybody. You know, uh, anything about George's picking technique, his octaves in a third, octaves in a fifth or fourth. Anything about the way we talked about, you know, or I will tell him. Who did you? Let's see. I get so many little questions here. Um, any questions about taking music and making it your own? You know. Hey, look. Even when unfortunately, I didn't remember the lyrics to the last gig, and I should have called them up on my computer, because Mary and I was asked to do Masquerade, and then I got caught up in doing a few other things and never really approached it. But you know, George was reluctant. I'll tell you the story about that real quick. George was reluctant to sing that song, and Tommy LaPuma had sent him a tape, and George was like, well, he never really gave it any listen. And you'll hear the stories online. I'm sure George has reiterated a million times. But anyway, he wound up doing a guide vocal on a very cheap mic because they told him to sing it. It wound up to be a one-take song, and the late Al Schmidt, Grammy Award-winning engineer, said that from that point on, George had to use that crummy mic because it was a good luck charm. So, you know, so he sang Masquerade, and that turned his world up around, you know, because he was, you know, he was known as won every poll for downbeat, playboy, guitar player, you know, you name it. He won all the polls as jazz guitar player, and you know was out on the road probably 48 weeks a year, and then came Masquerade, and George walked away with 6 Grammys. I think it was in 1976, or 5 Grammys. Since then, I think he's total 10. So, yeah, I mean, so, yep, you know, it was a great part, a great experience. I hope, you know, he keeps, every time I talk, he keeps saying, when are you going to come out here to Phoenix? So maybe Richie Hart and I can find some time now that Richie retired from his Berkeley days, and I'm kind of retired, and we go out there and we hang out with the big guy. But anyway, any questions? I'll figure out some topics we can chat about next week. You know, but you know, just briefly on Masquerade to show you something that is very self-evident in the first set of chord changes, right? It goes, okay. Well, my feeling is, after listening to it, that he's thinking this: F minor 9, B flat, as all B flat. Okay, because B flat is nothing more than F minor 6 or F minor 6 9. Okay, so now here's his opening phrase. He plays D flat, a blues note, flat 3 or sharp 9 on B flat. Let's see. Uh, See, so I mean, it's all about melody. It's all about, it's all about surrounding. Hey, Mark. Hey, buddy. When you gonna come down and sit in with us uh, on Tuesdays again? Um, I'm sure you had met George when George was living in Englewood. He was everywhere. You know, he is a peach. He's a, oh, John was gonna come too. Ah, that'd be awesome. Come down, bring your axe. Tell John to bring his axe, and we'll sit in. Um, Anyway, any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to let you all go. Thanks for joining me. I'll figure something to talk about next week. I'm never short on words. I guess in the Italian world, I'm a chiacchierone. Uh, yeah, Gilsonite music. Yeah, with Phil Keller. Um, yeah, that's where George was hanging out. I met George when I was still at Berkeley. Um, and at the jazz workshop, and then of course Gilsonite hanging out there, and then we became tighter when George's son Robert Benson, who's a sax player, was getting ready to go to Berkeley, and I used to be I was after I graduated Berkeley, I taught there for a number of years, and then when I came back to New York. I used to be used by the admissions department to get people prepared, especially people of, you know, of what's the right way to say this? People in the music industry's children. So I had Blue Wildling. I think his dad was a composer. I had and so when George contacted my dear friend Steve Lippman, who's the dean of admissions at the time. Steve Lippman suggested that he come see me, and I prepared Robbie for his music theory and all that stuff to get him into Berkeley. And that's kind of like when our families just, we were together tons of times and hanging out and just, we'd be sitting like when Rich Giorgiani was at my house, just sitting out having a barbecue, having sausage and peppers and drinking wine and playing guitar. I have a few candid videos I think you could find on my Facebook page and all of those days. Days cherished for sure. Anyway, I'm just going to doodle around here, and if no questions show up, then I'm just going to sign off. Hope all good, and I'll see you next week. lost myself in that. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Stay safe.